'Cause I always find it interesting because I moved to UK when I was 12.
Oh, so
Yeah. So I moved to UK when I was 12, and I always find people's stories interesting. People, especially people that moved, to UK from another country, because I feel like obviously London's a bit more, I guess, like forgiving. So where did you move to when you moved here?
Oxford.
Oxford.
Yeah, straight to Oxford.
Yeah. What was that? What was that experience like?
Bro, it was. I mean, when I first heard about, you're moving to England, I'm thinking, what the hell is England, bro?
And obviously you couldn't speak English or anything like that.
I was learning a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess it starts with like where kind of like how I started my journey, I suppose. It kind of starts there. But like, I didn't know anything of English. My mum came over first. She got married.
Yeah.
And then we followed. Me and my sister followed.
How long did it take for you to move after your mum?
She was here for I think a couple of years first.
Yeah.
And then we came on like a 6-month visa.
Yeah.
And then we went back to Brazil for like a year.
Okay.
And then after all our papers were sorted out, then we moved back indefinitely.
I'm smiling because like my story is kind of similar, obviously just different age and stuff, but...
Only turn your mic.
Oh, turn it on. But yeah, so yeah, like similar with my mum moved there first. Yeah, my mum moved there. Mine's on as well, bro. Yeah. See, there you go, bro. Man's all capping, but yeah, no, my mum moved there first, and then 2 years later, I moved here with her. Yeah, man, it's strange, isn't it? Because like, when I first heard about this England place, I'm thinking, boy, I'm about to step up, and there's gonna be castles and horses. I mean, we got horses in Brazil, innit? So I didn't know why I was so shocked. At least I was thinking that because in Americans think it's just tea and biscuits all the time. So
yeah, no, I thought it was complete. I fully romanticized with the idea about coming to England. It's gonna be like flipping swords and knights and all that stuff.
Because that's what you saw on TV, innit?
Yeah,
and especially I think what you said, you were 7, innit? And I think at that age in particular, it's like I think as kids have like wild imagination. So
yeah, that was proper like on that medieval. These man, they don't have gun nothing. Because in Brazil, where all the police officers are strapped with guns in it.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking these men are gonna have swords.
Yeah.
I don't know how. But yeah, it was like that kind of thought process. And when I got here, it was just like, nah, man, this is not how I felt.
Do you go back to Brazil?
Yeah, at first I was going back every year, and then it became like every 2 years, and then it became every 5 years.
Because you got more adjusted down here. What was that thing where like there wasn't much to go for? Or?
No, it wasn't even that. It was more so like the prices for the flights just got ridiculous. And then so we couldn't really afford to go as a whole family, only the financial burden being on my mum to pay for everything.
Yeah.
So when she could, she would take us, and then obviously as we got older, we just started paying for ourselves. But it became just a matter of like having the money to go back, not only just to go back, but to also to be able to, I guess, live.
Yeah, of course. That's people forget that there's
Yeah, because we go back, and then obviously we have our family home that we stay in, so we don't have to pay any bills. But at the same time, it's like, bro, I don't want to go over there and just like be broke and not have any money.
Yeah, just chill. Yeah.
And then like all my family thinking, oh, but you live in England, you should be like, they think money grows on trees, innit?
Yeah, that's the thing. Listen, same thing in Lithuania. Like when I was going back, I've been back this summer, but before this summer, I haven't been back for like 11, 12 years. But I used to go back all the time, every single year. People used to think that, yeah, like literally, like in London, it's just like there's trees growing, money's just coming out trees, and it's just
sorry, I guess that was bad on my part to say that, but probably at the beginning that was like the full process, because we were like the first people in our household to like go out of the country. So when we came back, the misconception was that we were rich, but I think throughout the years that misconception has been kind of cleared up, and we're like, nah, because I guess if we convert the money from England to Brazil, it's a lot. But at the same time, we're still having to pay for our lives here. So obviously, the rent is higher.
Yeah, the cost of living
is higher.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just someone who's coming here to work for like 6 months or like a year and then go back to Brazil, you're going to be better off. But if you're living here, it's like you still have to pay the cost of living.
But would you say the conditions living here are better than in Brazil?
Bro, 100%. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, obviously, I haven't been to Brazil, and to me, from what's seen on media, I'm kind of scared to go there.
Really?
Yeah, it just feels like there's certain things people can't do. So for example, like I've heard stories like, for example, there was a woman who drove into favela by accident. And then basically what happens, so in the favela, in that particular favela, like they have to put the windows down so everyone knows who they are. So basically, so someone ended up shooting her, and they took her to like one of the like youth work projects, and then they got a medical, because he realized he just shot someone, you know, like a civilian that wasn't. Yeah. But the thing is, the rules are, they've got their own rules in the favela down there, which is like you have to put your windows down if you're driving through.
Yeah, I mean, like with places like Brazil, innit, you have to do your homework, or you have to know someone that knows the area. Because even myself, if I'm going into like Rio and going to the favelas, I'm not just stepping in just because I know how to speak the language and I'm Brazilian, I can go into these places. Nah, because the community, they'll look at me and they'll be like, they've never seen this person before. So first they're gonna think, is he fed? Is he like, I don't know, whatever, like a mole in the community? So they're gonna pull me up for questions straight away. Maybe not necessarily the community, but definitely the ones who are on the gang side of things. So even like going over there, like you just see, because there's so many favelas in Rio, it's like, think of each one as like their own neighborhood with their own set of rules. So even like some favelas, you can, okay, which one can I go to? Which one should I go to? Which one is the safest one? Because some of them, they're a little bit safer than others.
Yeah, and which one can you even go to? Yeah,
some of them, they're just like off limits, like, no, you can't go there unless you're part from the community.
Yeah.
So it becomes really political, and you without being from there, you don't even know. Like you're just stumbling in, and you don't even know what you're walking into. So it's hard, man.
So that can get scary.
Yeah, it can get scary.
But you know what? I do get like a really strong sense of community from Brazilian people in general, and from the stories I've heard from people that I've met. There's always like a strong sense of unity, even with people that are like in, you know, gang members in the favelas. Like they're always like together and they sort of look out for each other, which is, I think, it's quite beautiful. Yeah, man, it's nice. I feel like everywhere you go in Brazil, it's kind of like that whole unity feeling, which is something that I was definitely missing when I came to the UK. So like when I was also, I'm not from the south. I'm not from like the capital or Rio or Sao Paulo or any of the big cities like that. I'm from a place in the north called Belém. So when I moved to the UK, or even when I was a kid in Brazil, it's like, okay, it's quite normal for you to know all your neighbors and like your neighborhood and the parents and the shop owner and all these things, and you can go over and you'll just feel safe regardless of how dangerous it is. I could run up and down the street and I could feel safe knowing that I know where I'm at. When I got to the UK, it's like, okay, every single house looks absolutely the same. I'm walking around, it's like, I don't know anyone's faces. And obviously as a kid, I'm thinking, I'm not going to know any, I'm new. But as the years go by, you realize it's become like a normal thing. It's like your neighbors don't really interact with each other. At least back then they didn't anyway. But I feel like now it's become more of like, some people try and get to know their neighbors, especially if they're moving into like new places a little bit more. Yeah. But it was definitely not a thing when I first got here. So I always felt quite isolated, quite cold environment already in a cold country. Yeah. So it was a very big culture shock to me. I think that's a really good point. I get a sense of like, there's a lot of, everyone's out there for themselves in this country. That's the feeling that I get. I'm not saying that every single person's like that, but there are people who look out for each other, people who's got values and you know, that sense of solidarity. But there's a lot of people who are just kind of like just doing their own thing, and people don't really care about people just the same way they do in other countries, you know. Yeah, man. And I find that really strange, and I think it's a cultural thing, you know. I think and communities, for example, in particular in London, because it's super diverse. So there are certain communities you kind of stick together, but then outside of those communities, they don't really like mess around with other communities, or some of them do, but it's more in a rare case scenario. So there is that sort of like divide, but I really appreciate the diversity that we have here. Oh, you know? And I don't know how diverse Oxford is. You know what? It's actually really good. I feel like a stereotype that people have from Oxford is that it's like this really big, posh, Harry Potter looking place, right? Yeah. And don't get it twisted, like a big part of it, because it's owned by the university, can be like that. But if you venture outside of like the city centre of in Oxford, you find the community, which is like, you just think you're rolling around in London or something. Seriously. So there is that. But because when Oxford's being advertised, you're seeing these big, tall buildings, pointy skyscraper buildings that, well, not skyscrapers, but
pointy wizard buildings or whatever, that makes you think, oh, this is posh. But that's only like one part of Oxford, and then the rest is like any other town, man. I think probably maybe not your typical towns, but most of the towns around England, that's what it's like. Yeah. It's just that one part, and the university eats up the rest of the communities in terms of like tourism. So that's when you go to Oxford, you're thinking, Harry Potter. You're thinking potentially Bicester Village and all those things. Oh yeah, actually, I've been to Bicester Village before. Yeah, that makes sense. You know what? Yeah. Like I get a feeling that in the UK at the moment currently, there's people trying to conquer different parts of UK. So like initially London was like the place to go. And I think slowly what's happening, like other cities I've been to, slowly there's more like diversity going to different cities. And I feel like they're just trying to conquer it a little bit in a way, which is, I think it's quite cool. So maybe, I don't know, like 50 years, like maybe the whole UK would be diverse, depending on how it goes. Because, yeah, man. I mean, sometimes you hear about, especially, I don't know, especially, because I went to university in Leeds, my bachelor's. But when you think of like places up north, you're thinking not very diverse. I want to say someone, for example, like Hull. And when I think of Hull, I don't think very diverse, but I've been there, and it is. Or like I'm trying to think of. I've heard that Hull's a shithole though. Yeah, it's not very nice. Yeah, I've heard it's a shithole. It's not very nice, but it has been changing. Yeah, it's got like a big stigma. Like Blackpool is also, I heard, it's not a very nice place. I've been to Blackpool twice. Oh my god. Oh yeah, I don't think I'm going back there again. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, but yeah, I think things are changing, especially now that there's a big media boom that's migrating to North at the moment. So whereas the pulse for media was in London, and it probably still is, but because of the rise of living, everything's being moved up north because it's cheaper for taxes and rent and whatnot. So all the media companies are moving to Manchester. So I feel like the spread in diversity, the gap is going to decrease substantially over the next few years, and I say next 10 years or so, probably. So I've got a potentially easy or a hard question for you. Okay. Depending on how you're going to find it. What's your favorite life experience? Oh, I've got a few, man. I feel definitely once I finished university in 2015, I had the option to go straight into employment, right? To move down to London, which was going to decide whether I was going to move to London or stay in Oxford. Ultimately, I decided not to. Instead, I decided to go traveling. So I took whatever money I had in my account, and I was like, "Bun it, I'm going." So is it like backpacking sort of? Yeah, I went backpacking. Yeah. So I got to meet lots of different cultures, lots of different people, different foods, different religions, different sites. And I'm going to all these different sites, and I'm just thanking God for the opportunity of just being able to see all these beautiful places. And I felt like once I was in a city, especially in the first world, like the UK, it's like everything's very civilized. And that's what I got used to it, even after I came from Brazil. I knew how the Brazilians were living, and my family was living. And then coming to the UK, everything was civilized. And then going backpacking across the world and seeing like all these different cultures living in completely different ways. In the same sense of like unity that I missed from back home. And just seeing like these magnificent like just places that makes you sit around and think, fuck, man, this place is beautiful. And it really puts life in context as well. Yeah, man. What do you feel like he was looking for when he decided to travel? Like, was he searching for something at that time? You know what? At the time, I made a joke saying I was just trying to find myself. And I would make jokes about like, oh, I'm going to go to East Asia, Southeast Asia, find a monk, he's going to train me Kung Fu or some Shaolin Kung Fu, and then I'm going to be meditating in the mountains and eating off berries. I think that's cool. Yeah. I mean, that was just like a joke of me making when I was younger, but I feel the reason why I actually went, it was just an opportunity. Whereas at the time I thought, man, if I don't travel now, I've just been given this opportunity to work. If I don't go, I'm going to be stuck in this kind of environment for probably the next 10 years. Yeah. If I go now, my life's a little bit more open, and I can kind of like start up again when I come back. So I guess it was more I jumped on the opportunity to travel and go meet new places and see different things that I hadn't seen before, because I was just thinking I'm not going to get a chance, or I might not get the chance. So once I've got it, I'm just going to jump at it.
Yeah. I always find it funny when people say like find myself, and I know you said it like as a joke sort of thing, but a lot of people sometimes say like I need to find myself, and I've said it in the past as well. But then it's funny because people don't usually look here, like they look out there somewhere. So it's either they need to go to another country or do something else, and they forget that to find themselves they have to look here. Like it's not out there, it's here. Which I find it really interesting. But I think with traveling in general, like I live by this sort of like theory of like, you know, the more I learn about the world, the more I learn about myself, and the more I learn about myself, the more I learn about the world. So the best way to do that is through traveling. I learn more about myself through being exposed to different experiences. Yeah,
and I feel like me being, I don't want this conversation to be solely about me being Brazilian and whatnot, but coming from a different country at a young age, I was forced to accept a different culture and grow up in that culture. So being already kind of like open-minded to a few things was already built into me, just because it was forced into me. And so once I finished school, even, I decided I didn't want to go to university. I wanted to go to America. So I went to America. I lived in America for a while.
Sick.
And then when I came back from America, I was like, let me go see what's happening in Spain. So then I went to Spain, stayed there for a while before deciding that I wanted to go to university. And by this point, I'd already kind of like traveled around Europe, you know, doing holidays and stuff with friends and stuff like that. So not really experiencing the culture as much as I was in these other places, but still getting the basis of what it is to live in Europe.
Yeah.
So at this point, like I had already traveled a little bit, kind of like ignited that love for me for going out and seeing new places. So by the time I finished university, I had already been through most of Europe. I had been to a few African countries, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and a little stopover in Egypt.
You travelled quite a bit, man.
Yeah. A relatively good amount. So once I finished uni, it was just like, okay, I've got this amount of money, which wasn't a lot, by the way. It was £1,500. And at the time, there was just a bombing it was a terrorist attack in Thailand. So flights dramatically decreased. And I looked at it and I was like, boy, I'm going to Thailand
that's perfect
for £150. So I bought the flight, £150. Next day I was on a flight. Boom. And I only had 1,500 to my name. I stayed out there for like 4 months. Not just in Thailand.
So just to clarify, was that the time you was doing the backpacking?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And you know what? Yeah, sorry, I just want to get into it, because I feel like a lot of people mention the phrase backpacking, but I've never like been able to explore the details of it. Like, how does it work in particular? Like, what do people do? Like, how do they make the money stretch and all of that stuff? Because people talk about backpacking, but I've never heard actual technical details of it.
So I went into it probably less of a plan than most people did. So
I'm guessing like you will have a bag or whatever with certain amount of clothes.
Yeah.
And you make that last, and it's like, I'm guessing like you'll find ways to wash them and.
Yeah, I mean the good thing is that you get the concept. You get a bag, quite one of those big hiking bags. I'm trying to fit in as much stuff that I can there as possible within my weight limit to take to the country, which I think is like 23 kilograms. And the good thing with Southeast Asia is that they welcome backpackers. So the idea of hostel, I never thought about staying in a hostel in my life. I just thought, I'm never staying in a hostel. That's where you get killed. But then as I was there, I just realized, bro, some of these hostels are like hotels. And because the money that I had stretches so far over there, I could literally book in and stay in a hotel. And I can put in my clothes to be washed. And then I was living like that, hotel to hotel or hostel to hostel.
And you meet other people as well that are doing same similar sort of.
Yeah, so from Thailand to Vietnam, I met like a group of people who kind of like, we were sticking around the same journey for like 2 weeks. So I met those guys and we just went traveling. And then people who I still have connections with this day, that being like 7 years ago was when I went. And it's just keeping the relationships, man. So I went from Thailand to Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia.
That's so cool.
And I ended up in the Philippines before completely running out of money. And I was like to a friend of mine who is from the Philippines, is like, yo, can I come stay at your house? I've run out of money. And he goes, yeah, my dad's, because he lives in the UK. And he goes, yeah, my dad lives there. You can go to Manila. So I stayed in Manila for a week. And the reason why I ran out of money is because at the time, my family was going to Brazil for Christmas. And I thought, well, I'm not just going to be spending Christmas by myself. So then I thought I'm going to make my money stretch so I can get a flight to Brazil. So that's, if it wasn't for that, then I would have had money to stay for a bit longer. Because of that, then I went to Brazil and then I came back to the UK.
So how long did you travel for in total then?
I think I was there for like a good 4 months or so.
Wow, that is a really long time.
For £1,500,
yeah,
bro,
that's
crazy.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
I don't think I could do that now, to be honest. I feel like...
What's the difference?
Conversion rates.
Massive conversion rates. But if the conversion rates weren't that high, then would you do it?
Yeah, I
would.
think so. Yeah,
that's so cool, man.
Like I went back to Brazil this year, and I only took about £1,000 with me, and I made that last for a whole month.
And you know what? Part of me, like, I always wanted to do that, but I don't think I will. I just feel like there's certain things that I'm in love with in just living in London and just sort of like, I don't know, man. I don't feel like I need to go anywhere. Like I'd like to go other countries and just visit more and, you know, travel here and there, but I don't know. I'm just not really like too keen on just seeing the rest of the world. And that's an interesting...
How come? If you don't mind me asking.
I don't know. I haven't figured it out. I don't know what it is. Like, for example, even when I go on holidays, like I think 3-4 days in, I get homesick. Like I really want to go back to London.
Yeah.
Like even if I'm having the best time ever, like I just want to go back to London.
Oh, interesting.
There's some kind of attachment that I haven't figured out yet, and I'm still exploring, trying to understand what that means and what it is.
That's interesting because I think to me, just being fascinated by just other countries and other cultures and other sites, it was like, okay, I would love to. You know, when people make a bucket list, I started making a bucket list from early.
Do you ever have like a scratch map? You know, some people get a scratch map.
I got one of them. It was given to, I didn't go out and buy it. It was given to me. But I had like a bucket list, and one of them is just to see all the natural wonders of the world. And so I'm still scratching that off, but I thought the only way I'm going to ever be able to do these things is if I get out of here. And I don't mean to forever, because I want to stay in England. I want my home is what I call is England, is Oxford.
So you're building your life here in overall,
Yeah, that's right. But then just being able to see these things, I have to go and see, I have to educate myself a little bit more.
Would you ever move to another country to live there permanently?
I think being in America put me off that. Yeah, really put me off. Just because I guess at the time when I was growing up, I thought, seeing all these films and you're like, oh man, I gotta get out of here. I think that my mentality was I gotta get away, as far away from my parents as possible. And then when I was actually away, I was like, oh, this life's tough, man. This life is tough.
It's not easy.
Saying that, I've been out of home since I was like 19. So going to America, Barcelona, and then going to university for 3 years, coming back, going traveling, and then decided I wanted to do my master's, and then so going away to Bournemouth for a year. And I think it was only in 2018, so for the last 4 years, it's the longest I've been in Oxford at home since I was 19, and I'm 31 now. So it's like, there's something about where I grew up and the nostalgia and having my friends there and having people I can rely on that just makes me feel safe and secure. So I like being in Oxford. That's why I built my whole life. My work is based around being in Oxford. Yeah. And because it's so close to London, I don't feel like the need to travel. Like, I know I was late for this. No. But normally I can get to London, especially west, in like an hour or 10. If I need to go to east, if I'm working, I'll drive. It'll take me like an hour 50 or 2 hours to get here. Yeah. But when it comes to London, I can just whiz back and forth in my car. If I want to go down to Bournemouth, it's about an hour and 20. Birmingham is about an hour away. The only real place I have to travel far is if I want to go up north, if I want to go back to Leeds. So I just felt like Oxford was a good space for me to be. Definitely. What's the one thing that people should know about you, and how do you get a feeling of importance? How do I get a feeling of importance?
Yeah. And,
ooh.
And what's one thing that people should know about you?
One thing that people should know about me is I'm very positive about everything. I feel like that's like my superpower, if you were to call it. I hardly ever let anything get me down, and I'm quite a yes type of attitude.
Does that ever get in your way? As in, like, for instance, like sometimes you kind of see the positive in situations that turn out negative anyways, but you're kind of like, it's almost like, I don't want to call it delusion. It's not delusional. It's a beautiful thing, by the way. I'm only saying this because I can relate to that quality of just kind of being positive about everything. But I feel like there's been times where, like, I've been so positive about stuff and almost to the point where it's delusional and the thing just turned out negative. But it was still nice to kind of go through the process in a positive sort of light.
For me personally, I think one of the reasons why I can be so positive about literally everything I do, is why I'm so laid back about everything, is I think a lot of it has to contribute with my belief. So I'm Christian, and so whatever is in this plane of existence, I can control. And so if anything that I can't control, it's not for me. Yeah. And so I don't even think about it. And so if it's like, if it's God's will, it's God's will. If it's for me, then it's for me. Then it's gonna go the way I need it to go. If it's not for me, then it's not, and I don't even bother stressing about it. Obviously, there's things that, as a human being, you have to stress, and I just feel like it's human nature to overthink things, and think about certain situations and how things go and how things shouldn't go. But from the moment I no longer think I can control it, is the moment where it's like, it's out of my head. Yeah. And at that point, it's such a release for me, which I can be laid back about things. But like things that I can control, that's when I get stressed about it. It's like, okay, I need to do this, and this, and that. Like paying bills. Yeah. It's things that I can control. If I'm ever feel like I'm short on like a certain bill, it just means for me, it's like I need to work harder so that this doesn't happen next month. So
there's a lot of like personal accountability just to elevate yourself to get to that point that you want to get to.
Yeah, realistic.
I think that's a good way of living.
Yeah, realistic accountability though. Like I'm not going to expect, oh man, if I don't have this Lambo tomorrow, then I've messed up in life kind of thing, right? So it's like step-by-step thing. Step-by-step, setting up goals that I have in my head and making them as realistically as possible. And even to a person that doesn't think that realistically, if I know that I can follow this path, and even if I only get halfway there, then I know, okay, well, here I am at this point, but last year I was there, and these were the goals I was setting up. So knowing that I can get to these goals, it's kind of like my thought process and how I navigate through life.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, sir.
So I know one of the things you wanted to talk about today as well was you find colours fascinating. Just in terms of like, do you want to explain it yourself instead of me paraphrasing?
So I'm my background is filmmaking, and I guess once I was kind of developing my skills as a director and a cinematographer, is I'm trying to, and I run my own production company as well. So it's trying to navigate through each skill to a certain point where I can communicate what I need other people to do. So when we're talking about filming, I can kind of say the technical skills to a cameraman or to a cinematographer about how I want this vision to be. If it comes to like a colorist, I can talk to him about how I want these colors to emit. And I think with coloring specifically, it was always a case of traveling, seeing all these different colors in the sky. When I was in Bali, actually, bro, the sunsets were crazy. And I'm seeing these crazy colors full of life. And I'm like, how does each color like muddle into like this vast space, but at the same time, they own their own space? Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. Like I'm like super philosophical, and my mind is going to, like, it's not that the color muddles into it. I think it's the sky that muddles into the color. Okay. So I think it's the way around, because I was thinking about the RGB thing. Aladdin, by the way, can you pull it up in a bit if that's cool? So I was thinking about the whole like RGB thing, and how did you even create that? Like, like the whole like palette of creating different colors. And I had a question for you today, which was around, it's like when you think of a color doesn't exist. And then I was thinking about, and I know it's going to get a little bit like philosophical, but I was thinking about the actual RGB, what's it called? RGB palette RGB palette, yeah. And how the whole palette itself is life itself. Like, I know it's really deep. It's life itself, because everything in life connects to that palette. Every single color in life connects to that palette. There's no color in life that doesn't connect to that palette. So it's interesting how our surroundings can be transferred into the palette. For me, it's the other way around. For me, it's not that the colors got transferred onto it. The colors already been there. It's just we transferred that onto the RGB palette.
It's interesting, because I guess my approach to it is that color, to me, is subjective to the person. So what even is color anyway? We see color because we're not colorblind, so we can distinguish that something is blue, red, yellow, whatever color it might be. But that's only because of light. So as light travels through the atmosphere and bounces off these things, it gives kind of life to the colors and what we perceive them to be.
Well, color's a label, right?
Color's a label.
Yeah, like color itself. So how can I explain this? Because sometimes I think about things I can't necessarily articulate all the time, or something's new for me. So let me try to explain this. So for me, color's a label to something that's already there.
Right.
So for example, like realistically, like this is not blue. Blue is just a label to describe what this is.
Okay, yeah.
Rather than what it really is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Colors didn't come first. And a lot of the time people live life like that. Color was the first thing that was invented. Life existed first, and then we create labels for how we can describe different parts of life.
Language.
Language, basically. So, and then obviously, so do you want to pull up the RGB palette? Because that's interesting actually in itself.
So I think something like this is hard to kind of run through the discovery of it because it's so old. But I'll run through what the first... So I typed in the discovery of RGB on Google, and this is what came up. And I think it's mainly around TV. But the color TV pioneer John Logie Braid demonstrated the world's first RGB color transmission in 1928, and also the world's first broadcast in 1938 in London. In his experiments, scanning and displaying were done mechanically by spinning colorized wheels. Yeah. So I don't know what that means, but essentially, I think he just talks about how the discovery and the first demonstration of RGB was 28 and 38.
Well, technically 100 years ago.
Yeah. Which is not that long ago, if you think about it.
No, it's not.
So before that, we didn't have that many labels. Maybe there were certain colors that existed, but not...
he's talking about how it came into the media side.
Yeah.
Okay.
So colors already existed long, like the label of colors.
But did the RGB palette exist before that?
Okay. So I guess what it is the RGB palette, from my understanding, became a term used to encompass the colors that could be used at the time, though the easiest colors to be used at the time when it came for television and for broadcasting purposes. So you get the RGB palette, and all kind of other colors come from that. Now, why is it green instead of yellow? I don't know.
That's the question I've always been asking.
Because you'd think the primary color should be red, blue, and yellow, but it's green. That I'm not certain why. I haven't done my research on that one. I just know it as the RGB wheels.
I think RGB is mainly in tech. I think RGB, like the phrase acronym of RGB is basically, it's like the whole thing of like a single pixel has red, blue, and green lights.
Yeah.
And whichever color the pixel needs, it will turn on and off, whichever one accordingly. But I think RGB is mainly in technology, media, monitors, screens, whatever. But now we're talking about something even before that, like the actual the understanding and the visualization of color, of orange, of blue, of green, like actually seeing these colors and labeling them as what.
Yeah, I guess that the whole understanding of color has come up potentially since the moment language was being discovered. As you're looking at something, you're like, okay, what name should we name this thing? Oh, it's grass, but what is grass? It's like, oh, it's this green thing. And it's like, so you understand, like people.
It's almost like people can put things into categories. Like, so people, rather than going, this is grass, this is this, they can go, what's green? Grass, I don't know, tree leaves, whatever. Like,
yeah, it's interesting to see, like, when you're talking about language, it's just interesting to see, like, who came up with these words. It's kind of like, there's a joke where, imagine what the first person who discovered milk said, like, how that you could get milk from a cow. You know how messed up that is? Like, some guy or some woman, I don't know who did it.
I probably would have done it. I was just been like, what's that?
Yeah, but you know,
imagine
like
being that guy to say, oh, by the way, this white substance that comes out of a cow's tear is edible. Like, how do you know? And then now,
yeah, bro, like, there's so many trials and error that people went through. Because you have to think primitively, anything potentially that you didn't know or that was foreign to you, 99% of the time could have most likely killed you.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, how did people find out certain things are poisonous? They probably died in the process. Like, there's I feel like the discoveries that people have, like, created in the past, I don't know how many years they've existed for realistically, because, you know, people will say it's this many years or whatever. I don't really know. I don't think anyone knows. I think people always assume, or people have stories of something or whatever, but it's crazy of how many things we've discovered and how many creations those discoveries led to.
Do you know what? Sorry, what fascinates me, and I watched a mini video essay yesterday about the British, the European empires, and how they controlled about 94% of the world in, I think it was like 1950s, like, no, just before or after 1950, whatever. But it talks about how these empires and colonizers are controlling the world, and they're colonizing different parts of Africa and South Asia and whatnot. And they talk about all these bad things that they did and slavery, etc. But they also say, the guy also said, but what else did they do? Because so the middle of Africa in that time was called the white man's grave. And the reason being is because most people that went there never came back. Why did they not come back? Because the people that there at the time were very, like, territorial, and a lot of the illnesses were like, what's the mosquito one? Malaria. So that was like one of the main killers of a white man going to Africa. So what did they do? They found the cure to malaria, and now that's become like a standard vaccine in the world. That of like, now I can get hit, I can get like stung by a mosquito, no problems. But that solution came from colonizers, like finding solutions to these problems. So it's like, it gets me thinking, like, the creation of a thing, where did it come from? And sometimes that's one of the biggest things, that some of the biggest medicines that we have in our world came from some of the most fucked up like foundations. It's fascinating.
Yeah, man. It's I mean, I feel like there's a cure for all diseases somewhere out in the wild anyway. Just the Amazon, I feel like that's got the cure for anything in the world. It's just a case of finding it. Yeah. And there's probably, and this is just from the tribes in Brazil, you have to think these guys will live in huts, no clothes, encountering all different types of stings, illnesses, bites and whatnot, and they were being cured. But granted, probably their popularity diminished over the years because of it. But it became like survival of the fittest, and then finding, okay, which herbs, which plants can we use to cure this? And even until now, there's still tribes in Brazil that are still going and still in population, I guess. But not just in Brazil. You have tribes in Asia, tribes in Africa, who will just be using herbal medicines and what nature gives them to be able to do it. And I think the idea of the colonization is, I'm not saying that they didn't invent it, because I don't know, but it might have been a case where they saw the practice being used, and then they monopolized it. And then it became like I guess, your white style medicine. That they began to push the agenda of white supremacy over other nations or other countries, saying, oh, if you don't take this medicine here, you're going to die from this disease and this disease and this disease. We see it happening right now in the last 2 years of COVID. You know, a lot of people, not a lot of people, but quite a few people didn't actually get COVID. And those who did kind of like recovered by themselves without a use of medicine. Some people decided not to take the medicine. So I guess it depends on the propaganda that was being used at the time, really. I personally think anyway.
What number of the jab are you on now? 5th? probably.
Before I stopped at 2.
Yeah, I stopped at 2 as well, but I think we're in the 5th. But
Stopped at 0.
huh?
Oh yeah, you
Oh,
were
you
one of
never
the
had one?
non-vaxxers in there. I remember.
I'm not non-vaxxer.
Come on.
You know what I'm saying?
Come on.
I'll show you.
Nah, respect.
The only vaccine is this is Brazilian wax.
Was that?
No, but I heard you get free pizza on the 7th vaccination anyway. So
Free pizza.
yeah.
Who said this?
Nah, it's just a joke. Just a joke. It's just a joke. Yeah, you might as well start getting your vaccines, bro.
I might get all 7 months for free.
But listen, it's weird though. Like, did you get ill in the last like 2 months?
Bro, okay, so me, I'm a person that hardly ever gets ill. In the last 2 months, I've been ill twice. And so I read somewhere, or I think someone told me, and at the time I didn't really pay attention to it until recently, but it's because a lot of people who got COVID, COVID may have actually changed their metabolism.
Yeah.
No, it's not metabolism, is it?
It's
immune
not
system. Their immune
yeah.
system.
It just evolves, innit? That's
Yeah.
what it is.
So I think biologically, COVID may have changed. Obviously, I'm not no expert in it, so I can't say anything for certain. But
this is not medical advice.
Yeah, there's no medical advice.
It's not medical advice.
That COVID actually biologically changed our immune systems, which is why a lot of people are getting ill more frequently than what they used to.
Well, I think it could be that, or I think COVID is still about, just no one's talking about it.
Oh yeah, still about.
You know what? Actually, so just to clarify on COVID, like COVID's not a new thing. COVID's been about. The only reason they call it COVID-19 because that was a particular strain that was per se more dangerous that came out in 2019. But prior to that, COVID's always been called COVID. There was COVID-18, COVID-17, and all these different COVIDs. But I feel like I don't know a single person right now, and I know a lot of people who hasn't been ill in the last 2 months. And some people have been ill multiple times. So clearly, like, something is still there. And this is not like I'm making it up. Or maybe I'm projecting, I don't know. But it doesn't feel like previous years prior to this year. Like, this year just feels like everyone's like last year people were getting COVID. It was called COVID. This year people are getting flu. But it's not as serious as COVID was for some people.
Yeah, no, you know what? With me, when I got COVID, I was ill for 1 day. And then the next day I felt a little bit weak, but I was fine. And then that was it.
Yeah.
And then I didn't get ill after that for the longest time. This time when I got ill, bro, it felt so much worse than what COVID was. I thought it was what COVID was supposed to be. So I'm taking tests and I'm like, okay, well, it's not COVID because my mum works with elderly people in it. So one of the reasons why I took the jab was because of her. But then I realized, okay, it's not COVID. So what, is this just the flu? But I've never even had a flu jab. So I'm like, is this what these men are feeling? Because this feels garbage, bruv.
Yeah.
And even that, so I took the COVID test recently. Yeah, I forgot how much that test sucked.
Yeah.
Bro, putting stuff in your mouth. I'm
just
yeah, it's
nice
not
and
nice,
myth.
man.
Yeah, I had a really bad one 2 years ago in December. That was the one that was, what was it called? I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, I had a really, really bad one. That was like one of the worst ones. That was the one that had a side effect of being delirious and stuff.
Oh, so.
Well, like the reality is a bit distorted and stuff. So, bro, I was really feeling it. And then it got to the point where like I was so ill. I was just really, really ill for like 5 days in a row. I couldn't even go out for New Year's. I had like New Year plans and all of that stuff. And then basically, was that 2 years ago or 1 year ago? I don't even know. You know what, COVID actually like messed up my timeline in general. Like I feel like things that happened a year ago happened 2 years ago. Yeah. So it's COVID, like it just messed up my timeline.
Yeah, I hear that.
But either way, I woke up one morning and I felt like I had the worst fever ever. And I checked my temperature. My temperature was normal.
Oh,
that's how crazy it was. Yeah.
That's nuts, man. I hate getting ill, man.
But listen, I wanna get into anime a little bit as well, yeah.
Okay.
What's your top 3 anime?
My top 3 anime?
Yeah.
Oh boy, okay. I think solely for nostalgia purposes.
So I can just add something extra to that as well, okay. Yeah. Your top 3 and what you've learned from it. It can the learning part can be brief if you want to.
Okay. For nostalgia purposes, I have to put Dragon Ball Z in there. Because I think that's the main anime that got me into it. What I learned from Dragon Ball Z now, probably as a kid I didn't learn absolutely nothing from it other than how it probably ignited a passion into drawing.
But do you think you could have learned something subconsciously as well without realizing it at that time?
You know, probably. I mean, it definitely ignited things for me. Like, my passion for drawing came from watching these characters and then doodling something on a piece of paper. And in fact, one of my passions first, before doing film, was to become a cartoonist. So I guess the embers of telling stories have always been there from some form or another. Now, my second one, I would say, is One Piece. One Piece by Eiichiro Oda. What has that taught me? You know, that's taught me a lot. One Piece has actually got some really, really good stories that I like to implement in things that I'm doing. So like, with One Piece in general, it speaks a lot about themes of racism, social class,
it's actually
ambition.
quite deep.
And then if I were to explain it without giving the title of One Piece, I could say loads of interesting things about it, and people say, "Oh, what's that? It sounds really good. Oh, it's the little cartoon. No, it's a little anime, Japanese anime that I watch." And then people will become like, "Oh, okay."
I want to get into that as well, like people's misconception of what anime is as well. But in a second, anyways, I'll let you finish your top three.
Yeah, One Piece. I feel like One Piece in general, to me, is, or Eiichiro Oda, the author, is our generation's J.R. Tolkien. Just his use of like storytelling. Oh, that's one of the things actually I learned from One Piece is storytelling, is foreshadowing events so that the reader or the audience have something in the back of their heads that they don't find out about until much, much later. And that's one of the things that anime in general actually kind of put into my head, is that withholding information for a greater payback later on, which films already do anyway. But I feel like my first encounter with that was in anime from when I was a kid. And I guess my third one is probably Naruto, man, because it's just cool. The idea of ninjas. Ninjas are always the cool aspect, I found. And then just giving them like all these powers and the use of chakra, which are all already human-based concepts, but exaggerating them to the point where you can do all of this. And I guess the difference between the anime, which is Japanese culture, based on, the majority anyway, is based on real things or myths and laws from that specific culture in the East. Whereas like cartoons, when you think of cartoons, you think of super wacky, over animated. First you think of probably like your Tom and Jerry's and your Looney Tunes, but then you probably think towards your superheroes, which are like, oh, the majority of like superhero powers come from some sort of science or some form, spider biting, a radioactive spider biting someone, or like an X gene that comes from like a mutation. So they're all very scientifically explained, whereas like, and that's in the West, but whereas in the East is very focused on like the lore and the myth,
like mythical,
and the culture of things that will happen at a certain point in time of that part of the world.
Yeah, I think that's something really beautiful about, because I haven't watched anime for a little while now, but I used to be like a big anime fan. I don't watch anything in general anymore, so I just try to like just do other things and whatnot. So, but I do miss watching anime, and one thing that I really loved about is there's something about Japanese people and how they tell the stories and how they portray values within those stories, and how some people got values. Even like Naruto, for example. Like my biggest takeaway from watching that was how I shouldn't allow experience defeat me, because there's a lot of different times I could have given up basically by going through certain experiences. But the whole point of just being resilient, just being, you know what, I'm going to rise above that experience, and I'm not going to change because of that experience.
I feel like as a kid, kids are like sponges, innit? So things that they see ultimately in a certain one way can shape them to what they're going to become. So whether they see or whether they experience it. So a kid might be watching this this cartoon or this anime about a kid that never gives up and focuses on their dreams, right? As a childish thing to say, or as a child might say, oh, I'm going to do this and nothing's getting in my way because I know I'm going to do it. that's a very blanket statement. Then you're trying to figure out how you're going to do that. And that's something that evolves as you grow up. Probably as you grow up, you kind of forget the thing that truly inspired you to say that thing, which might be like a Naruto character saying, oh, I'm going to become the head of the village. But that one little phrase or that one sentence could potentially shape that person to be, okay, I want to be the head of my company. I want to create my own company and I want to be the head of it. Even if that gets lost subconsciously, there are certain things that a lot of kids hold on to and shape them. Me becoming a filmmaker, my stepdad was a cameraman for Channel 4. So when I came over to the UK, he was engrossed in all these editing soft, doing all this stuff that I had no idea about. He was still working on a tape. So I'm seeing all these tapes and I'm like, bro, this looks like a mess. I never want to do this ever. And then obviously now,
and this is like the VHS tapes sort of times. Yeah.
And then so he put my first camera in my hand. So as I was doing it, I just thought, oh, this is just a tool. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just going around, I'm filming some stuff. And it wasn't until I got to my A-levels where it's like, what am I going to choose? Well, GCSEs even, what am I going to choose? And I decided to choose media studies because I quite liked what I was doing with the little camera. I didn't think I was any good at it, but I was probably more passionate about it, or I thought it was more fun to do this than anything else. And this just goes back to the point with like things that you see that you think probably won't shape you. Actually, they have such a big role to play in your life. And kids are always watching, man. They're always watching. Even if you don't realize, kids will be watching you and thinking, oh man, I like what this guy is doing. Not really understanding what he's doing, but they might just be attracted to like the energy. And after they look at you once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, they'll be like, okay, cool. They begin to understand a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, to the point where they can now make decisions. Okay, do I want to be this or do I want to be that, based on the experience and what I've observed from this person.
No, that's a really powerful thing. So my dad and my mum split. I can't remember. It must have been like maybe like 5, maybe 4 at that time. I don't know exactly what age actually. I should ask her. But so before they did split, like what my dad used to do. So he was like similar times as well. He was like a person who used to fix like TVs or fix their VHS video players and that sort of stuff. So what he used to do, he used to like give me those things to put them apart with a screwdriver, whatever. And basically, because what he would do, he would take out certain parts and use them for repairs later on. And what I realized actually, that experience in itself carried on to the rest of my life, which was around understanding how things work. So now I've got a selective sort of like, I'm selective with what I want to understand. But before that, I used to be interested in everything. Now I'm just like, I can't be learning about everything because there's so many different things to learn about. But it carried on into my life. It's just like, I want to understand how certain things work. So for instance, like even one time I was fixing my own car. I've done a couple of things with my car, but I was actually changing the fuel pump and I've learned how it works and what it does. And till this day, I've got experience and knowledge in how that works.
Right.
And I can probably even do it in another car. And I know that some cars got 2 and all these different things, but that's just through the process of like, when I was younger, I was taking things apart and then seeing how they were built. Yeah,
man. And even going like to, obviously like this whole experience in regards going back to like anime, especially like some of these fighting ones like Dragon Ball Z and the ones that contain battles and violence and whatnot. And I guess as a kid, especially as a boy, you go onto the playground and you will kind of want to assert that you're better than the other kids, innit? Sometimes that might be something to say like a stupid statement like, oh, I'm stronger than you or I'm faster than you. And then until someone says, prove it. Okay, now we have to race.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, then now we have to fight or something. And you might lose the race or you might lose the fight and realize, okay, maybe I'm not as quick as I thought. How can I get quicker? Then that might ignite a passion for you to get into sports or something. Or you might lose the fight and say, oh, actually that hurt, man. I don't know if I want to do this again. You know, like you get these experiences. And some people, they want to go into fighting, they want to become professional fighters and things like that. And some people just get violent. So you never really know where these experiences are going to take you and where they're going to lead you. But regardless, they're there. And also one of the reasons why I like anime so much, not necessarily some of these shonen or these battle ones that you might see on TV, but mostly some of these film ones that have been made by like Studio Ghibli's and like these masterpieces of work. I've realized that a lot of my favorite films are almost carbon copies of anime films or cartoons that I've already watched.
Yeah.
One of the things which I found really interesting is when I was watching Inception, it's like one of the reasons why I liked it so much, and I never knew this at the time, but I'm like, I've seen this done somewhere before. And then when I went to watch Paprika, which is an old anime film, I was like, bro, I'm watching Inception. But Paprika came out like 20, 30 years before Inception. And then I started to like pick out, okay, what other films that I love are retelling these animated stories. And one of the good things, why a lot of these people get away with it, a lot of these directors and filmmakers, is because when you think of anime, you think of the demographic that is children. But as soon as you put that into film, okay, now you're appealing to an adult audience. And this adult audience, they won't necessarily know that this is taken from Paprika or this is taken from another animation. You know, they're just gonna say, "Oh, this is Inception," or "This is because Dunkirk," or whatever it might be, or what's the other one that Christopher Nolan did? Oh man, Tenet. Things like Tenet.
Yeah, well, I watched Tenet. Yeah,
you know, and those films, and it's not just Christopher Nolan. There's a lot of other directors that do the same thing. They just take bits and pieces from famous animations, or not even famous animations, but other, I guess, obscure works that the West may not necessarily go out and watch as often.
Yeah.
I know a lot of it is inspired by like Journey to the West, which is a Chinese story that is about a monkey king traveling to India. Even though it's called Journey to the West, he's only really going from like China to India, which to them is the West. But to us, we're thinking, oh, this guy's doing flipping the East all the way to America or something like that. And that even that is like a concept for films now. You think of like Coming to America. It's the same thing. It's journey from the East to the West. Even though Africa is when we see the map, we think as the center, and then going to the West, which is the Americas. Yeah,
I think you're definitely right. I feel like they would target an audience that don't necessarily watch anime, and people watch it and then they might not even pick it up. And some people that watch anime, they probably pick it up. But also I feel like maybe back in the day there was a limitation on how maybe certain shows could be produced. Like for example, how certain animes could be transferred onto like, you know, like sort of real life recorded shows, because obviously, you know, technology wasn't as great, the CGI wasn't as great and all these different things. And I feel like anime was way more complicated to be created in real life. That's why. Did you watch the Dragon Ball Z movie?
Bro, we don't talk about that, man.
Yeah, I know. That's but this is a good example of how difficult it was to translate the actual anime itself into actual movie. And I think now we got to the point where I'm seeing a lot of Japanese like potential animes that used to be an anime or would have been an anime becoming a TV series.
Yeah.
And some of them are really, really good because the technology's got to the point where they can do all the CGI stuff.
Yeah, you know, when it comes to like, especially if we're talking about animation series that are being adapted into films, the biggest gripe of it is that, I guess back then was, if you're going to tell a story of that grandness, like say for example, we'll say Dragon Ball Z because it's Dragon Ball Z. They're trying to cram so much into an hour 20 thing. And one of the reasons why it was done so bad is because they're trying to take so many points from a story that expanded over 100 episodes. And that's like, what, 300, well, way more than 300, probably about 3,000 minutes into a story that's like 60 minutes and 20. That plus making sure to nail the characters, the CGIs and whatnot, it was always down to fail. Always down to fail.
Well, same thing happened to Death Book as well. Sorry, Death Note.
Oh,
same thing happened to that.
Yeah, exactly.
That was still a better version than what Dragon Ball Z became. But
yeah, one of the good I heard, and I don't know how true this is, but they're making a live action Avatar: The Last Airbender, but they're not doing it as a film. They're doing it as a series.
I think that makes more sense.
But they're doing it as a 1-to-1 adaptation. So the 30 minutes that you saw as a cartoon is what you're gonna get as a real live action.
That makes perfect sense.
That's, to me, that's perfect. And I feel like one of the reasons why a lot of these shows they do so badly is because they're trying to cram too much in to a new audience that may not necessarily know about it.
Yeah.
And it comes a lot down to the writing, to the directors who they have on board. I feel like characters can always be a hit or miss because you can learn to love a new character. But if you're fan obsessed, if you're a real fan, you want to know, okay, how are they going to tell the story? Say, for example, Lord of the Rings, the 10 Rings that just come out on HBO, that's been adapted from the Lord of the Rings, J.R. Tolkien's world of Middle-earth and whatnot. But what I've realized recently is that the 10 Rings of Power, or the Rings of Power, is not based on any of J.R. Tolkien's work. So they're completely new characters. And then what I've learned is that the studio only had rights to the appendix of Lord of the Rings. So they couldn't specifically name, this character was there and this character was there and this character was there. No, they can only use the world, the clans, not the characters, I guess the races of elves and dwarves and hobbits and all that kind of stuff. But they couldn't dive in too much into each character's stories, which is what I thought was like a downfall for the series. It's a great series.
Especially for like people that are fans of it.
Yeah, I love the series. I really enjoyed it. But I just felt that if you're not given the rights to be used something, then you're probably doomed to fail anyway. Take, for example, Sony's Spider-Mans and your X-Men and your Fantastic Fours. That they made all these films, but they didn't have the rights to them, so they couldn't really tell the stories that we wanted to hear. So they did a bad job, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But I feel like a lot of times what they do, they just use the hype, and they hope that the hype's gonna like solve the problem, but it's not the case. And I think maybe that's just, maybe there's a certain drive to get money, or like it's like, what's the next project, and it's like, what can we use as the hype to make money, and just kind of like just keep the careers going. But there might be a level of like, I'm really passionate about this. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know, because I've not really been in the industry too much, or I've not really witnessed it. So.
A lot of it, Netflix does this a lot, is, in fact, not even Netflix actually, a bunch of people do this, a bunch of production companies do this a lot, is, say you're a scriptwriter, you've got this idea, it's a great idea for a series or a film or whatever, and you pitch it, and I might say to you and say, that's really, really good, we'll buy it from you. Say I'll give you like 100,000 for your idea, and you say, cool, here you go, here's a script, fine. You're not going to see the script potentially for the next 10 years. They'll shelve it. So they shelve their idea. They'll rather buy your idea.
That's interesting.
So that no one else can make money from it, and you've got that in your back pocket just in case you need it. Say, for example, and the script that you might been given to them, they might use the title, and you'll see, my script's finally being developed into a film. But when you go to watch it, it's nothing like you've written. It's completely different. Just because they have to think about the money and how long it takes to make.
They're just buying the IP.
Yeah, they're making the IP.
Intellectual property.
So I think, for example, there was a period in time where MMA was really popular. Boxing was really popular during the Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao fight. The next thing you know, all of these boxing films started coming out. Films about fighting.
Like Creed and that.
Creed came out. And all these films were already ideas that they had shelved, that they weren't going to use. And then next thing you know, they're just making them. And they're just bringing them out one by one by one by one. And you're thinking, bro, how are they making these films so quick? It's like the Manny Pacquiao fight is like next week, and I've already seen like 6 boxing films come out this year. So it's like that.
Do you know what? I've just learned something new. That's insane. Actually, that makes so much sense. And they would utilize the right moment. They're like, cool, we got this script. That fight's happening. This will be a good time. That makes so much sense.
That's why things like Netflix is like their catalog is so extensive. Is because they've already bought all these scripts and they've already bought all these ideas. That it's much easier for them to just make something that they've got in their shelves than it is to make a completely new.
They just got a bank of movies and stories and all
exactly.
of that.
And that's why, like, even all these one thing that Netflix has been doing now has been telling world stories. So you might see films from other countries now being featured on the Netflix page. And that's just because they've already acquired the rights to tell these stories. Whether they wanted to tell that, they may have taken the story from like India and say, oh, we're going to tell the story, but we're going to tell it to the English audience. But now that this whole movement of inclusion and representation has been out, they know, well, actually now we might as well just do it for them and then capture that whole demographic of Bangladeshi or Indian type of descent people. So they can buy subscriptions to our service.
That makes perfect sense. Like, having been on Netflix for about a year and a half now, but while I was still there, there was a lot of like movies coming out at that time that were from, you know, based in different countries. That, you know, I was watching it with subtitles because sometimes they didn't have the voiceovers as well. But I prefer the subtitles anyways because I can hear the real voice of and the emotion, and I might even learn a couple words as well.
I think there's a real art to being able to dub a film that's not in the native language.
Easy,
it's not easy at all. You're probably there as a voice artist. You're trying to match the emotion of the scene as well as make it believable to the person listening, which 99% of the time it's not believable at all. But yeah, it's a hard job, man.
And sometimes they pick like, no disrespect to, I guess, to the voice actors, but they pick the voice actors that don't even match the character. Yeah. And it's just like, I think they could have picked a better option and whatnot. But, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, man, listen, where does your creativity come from? Apart from Dragon, because I know Dragon Ball Z was one of the...
Yeah, so it varies. It varies a lot. I'm very... There's a term which I didn't coin it, but I use it a lot, which is inspirational viewing or inspirational listening or inspirational experiences, which is out of nowhere, I might be having a conversation with you and I can be inspired by maybe a little thing that you said in that conversation. Or I might have a dream, so that's an experience. And I might be inspired to tell a story from that. A lot of colors inspire me. If I want to be able to tell a story in a completely monoscopic or monotonic color palette, I'll think of a scene of that nature. Or even during COVID, actually, a lot, I was going on walks. I listened to a lot of film scores. So I listened to a lot of Hans Zimmer, James Newton Howard, a couple of other guys as well. And when I'm listening to like their music in my headphones, I'm kind of envisioning scenes play out or ideas for scripts that I might have. And I think of like different scenarios and different stories that I could tell based on that piece of music or whatever I'm doing at that time. One of the ones that I kind of picked out, is one which I'm trying to develop at the moment, is about this. I was listening to music on a random walk one day, and it was just about a Brazilian woman working non-stop in the UK, only to send money back home. And this was something that I saw. It's not a story of my mother, but it is things or concepts that I picked up whilst I was watching her. So about a woman who comes to the UK and works a lot, only to send money back home, where her family thinks that, oh, she's got money, she can send it off, but not realizing that this woman is still having to live her own life here, and she's still dealing with her struggles, but there's the misconception is that she's rich over here. So the inspiration really can come from anything. Sometimes when I'm feeling uninspired or unmotivated to do anything, like I'll want to sit down and I'll watch a film based on like stories that I want to hear.
So is it mostly like accidental or intentional?
Accidental, yeah.
Accidental.
Yeah.
So it's not intentional. So you don't ever go like, today I'm gonna, because to me what it sounds like as well, like it sounded really powerful. It sounds like a lens. So it's like inspirational listening. It's like, and I'm talking about myself. I'm thinking like, maybe I can just do that for an hour a day or 20 minutes a day, whatever it is, to sit down and go, you know what, I'm gonna tap into my inspirational listening on my inspirational view, and then just go like, I'm gonna get some inspiration from something intentionally. Because I get the accidental thing, but just kind of creating that intentional
I guess
switch.
Intentionally, yes. But it's more so if I've already got a project in mind, say, okay, there's a story that I want to tell. How am I going to visually project what I have in my head so that other people understand. So then I'll go and watch certain things that have a similar genre to what I have in my head. I'll listen to certain
get some
things.
creativity.
Yeah, to bring some creative ideas. Like one of the short films that I directed a couple of years ago called The One in the Mirror is about this teenage girl who's dealing with self-identity, body dysmorphia, bad eating habits and things like that. So before pitching my idea to the crew and how we were going to tell it, I went out and I watched a bunch of like teenage films. I watched like PS to All the Boys I Loved Before and all these kind of like corny films that I really enjoyed actually. And just like seeing like the color palettes and like taking a screenshot and saving that and then listening now to what kind of music they were using, noting that down, or maybe even randomly listen to something completely different and seeing how that can clash with maybe one of the other scenes that I was planning. So I'm thinking of one scene, okay, how can I juxtapose this to something else? Well, I'm going to go watch something completely different. In the opposite direction. So I use that as kind of like my inspirational view.
It's like, how can you like unite two different worlds as well?
Yeah, that's it. So it's a lot to think of, but even like YouTube videos, I might watch like a little YouTube tutorial that's like a minute long, or like a reel on Instagram and be like, oh, I could use this on something or another, or the techniques, not necessarily to copy that carbon copy and do that, but implement techniques and then probably change it in a way that will benefit my style of storytelling.
I can't like at the moment I really hate YouTube, like YouTube's algorithm. Same with Google. Google and YouTube, because obviously they come from the same company, but I really hate the algorithm right now because and I think I might be like maybe the minority. I don't know, because I haven't really asked other people about it, but because obviously the whole algorithm is there to keep people engaged and spending more time on there because, you know, they make money like that. But the algorithm is annoying me because I'm finding it difficult to discover something new unless I go incognito. So whenever I go incognito, I get different potential videos that I can watch, or if I Google search something, I get different search options where like when I'm not incognito, they think I want to see something that I already know or I'm connected to, but I'm super random. Yeah, I don't care about seeing the same stuff or connecting the same. I like to see. I'm very like diverse when it comes to like watching videos or learning about something else. So that just drives me nuts, man. I can't part with that. Just with the creativity thing, me and Aladdin always say, we talk about creativity as, and I've actually picked this up from Jack Fresco, and we spoke about him earlier. Really cool guy, but it's about taking known elements and putting them together. And that's what kind of you spoke about. But the elements sometimes can be on a very opposite like spectrum of what they are, and but uniting them is just really incredible. And the thing of like inspiration and just taking inspiration from everything else, I've said this before as well, it's about, you know, like someone else has been inspired by the world. So whoever created that thing, they've been inspired by something else. They looked at something else for inspiration. And I find it annoying when people don't allow their projects to inspire the rest of the world, when they kind of keep it to themselves, or, you know, I find it frustrating. It's like, you've been inspired by the world, and, you know, allow the world to kind of be inspired by you, you know.
You know, there's people that kind of keep their secrets. I just feel like everything that you learned is supposed to be taught to someone else. Whether you mean to teach them or not, probably someone's going to pick something up from you or something up from me that's going to either inspire them or teach them something. Right? So purposely withholding information to specifically stop that person from progressing, I think is foul.
I think so too. I mean, but, you know, maybe in their perspective, they think they're doing the right thing. And that's what I realize. Sometimes there's just a different perspective. You know, like we might think it's foul, to them it might seem like the right thing to do. Yeah, because for you know, whatever reason they made up anyways.
I guess like it depends on, there has to be a lot of context, of course. I'm not just throwing out blanket statements like, oh, that's foul. There is context to everything that is being said. But if someone's just like generally trying to better themselves, unless you give them a reason why you can't tell them certain things, then if I'm asking someone for advice and how can you do this, and someone is purposely withholding that information from me without telling me why they're withholding that information from me, I'm going to feel some type of way. I'm thinking this guy's a waste man, bro.
Yeah, it's a little bit malicious, like in a sense. So you mentioned that you're very interested in lack of representation when it comes to Latin American people in media. Obviously, I'm guessing maybe being Brazilian might have something to do with it, but like, yeah, what's that about, and just in general, like, where did that come from for you?
I guess so. Okay, something that I've always lived with my entire life was, of course, coming over from Brazil and having been forced into this culture of the British, is I'm mixed raced, but I'm mixed raced within a mixed raced mother and father.
Can I just say something on that? Something just hit my head, yeah, because like I've been thinking about this a lot. When people say I'm mixed race, right? But I'm not saying you're not mixed race, but aren't you just raced? Like, it wouldn't just be like, because if there's one race and another race, at the end of the day, it's just race, right? Or are they two different races? Because aren't we a human race? Isn't that the ultimate race? Yeah,
we are. I guess
I'm just asking because it just hit my head. I'm just like, I find it really interesting.
I think what I meant by when I said that, maybe not race, but like, I know some people do categorize themselves as being mixed race because they come from two different races. But with me personally, is my mum is half black and half black Brazilian and half, I want to say, whatever Brazilian is at the moment, because Brazilian is just a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything.
So there's that. And then my dad, on my dad's side, who I never met, by the way, I had heard that he was also mixed with German, black Brazilian, native Brazilian and whatnot. So the Brazilian as a whole nation is a big hodgepodge of what they are now anyway, is a big hodgepodge of different people coming together to create this kind of colour that I am. But coming to the UK, it was very more black and white, or you're mixed, or you're somewhere in between. Yeah. Right? So coming to the UK and having to kind of explain to people that, oh, are you black or are you white? I'm like, no, I'm Brazilian. And it's like, oh, but Brazilian is not a colour. And I'm like, I don't know how to explain this to you. I guess I'm brown. Oh, so you're black. So no, I'm somewhere in the middle. And so having to deal with that, but not really having to, I guess, internalize it within myself fully until it became a really big thing during the murder of George Floyd. So now all of a sudden we have, and you can tell this is very recent as well, right? And all of a sudden we have black versus white, and then the rest of everyone kind of falls in the middle, but you're kind of forced to pick a side almost. Yeah. Especially if you're kind of going around saying, oh, I'm mixed race or I'm brown, then you're kind of forced to go into like kind of like the black side, which I always identified myself as Brazilian, but now all of a sudden it's like asking me a question, okay, well, what am I? Am I black? Am I white? I knew like I kind of wasn't white, but I'm kind of like, okay, now I'm leaning towards the black side of me.
I think ultimately you're human, and I think this is what I'm on. And the whole, like, I feel like there's a lot of division in the world, and I think you're right. There is, like, I've seen quite a bit of that. Like, people can't, for example, be neutral around certain situations. Like, are you this or that, or why do you think like that, and all of these different things. But I feel like that's happening with everything. Like, me and Aladdin just spoke about, just before shooting this, we spoke about, Aladdin keeps saying there's going to be war between men and women. I'm like, the war's already happening. It's like, you know, through social media or whatever. Yeah, it's not physical war where people shooting each other, but it's war. Yeah, it's war. You know, it might be war through media, it might be war through conversation. It's very unfortunate, but I hate it's like concept of like us versus them.
Yeah, bro. I hate that as well.
And that happens a lot, not just with race. It just happens. Like, and my thing is just like, but ultimately, the one thing that we all have in common, which is the main thing, like we're all a human being, like we're human being before anything else.
I think it's like, it's an ideology aspect, man. It's like, you know, my ideology doesn't match with your ideology, so we're not going to agree fundamentally. We're not going to agree on certain things, up to the point where maybe the things that we disagree on are so big that it becomes violent. I can't stand your way of thinking, and you can't stand my way of thinking, so we're never going to get on. But so like going back to that aspect, and then me thinking like I have to choose a side, okay. And then when I feel like I'm on this side, now I'm being told, but you're not black. You're brown. You're mixed. You know, don't pick and choose your battles when it's convenient for you. And it's like, okay, so then the whole third category of colorism comes involved, which are the people in the middle, right? And then from then comes to me thinking, okay, well, where do the Latino people fit in all of this? And so me diving into this, I'm looking at a lot of things that I watch and all the shows that I love, and I'm just looking through it, and it's like, bro, there's no Latin American representation here that's being put in a good positive light. When you think of your Latin American people, they're being used as like drug dealers.
It's a very limited amount in general.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. I didn't even think about that properly, but now that you break it down like that, and from what I've seen, yeah. And
so I'm looking at it, and it's like, bro, how am I supposed to really find my own identity when I'm kind of having to figure it out all by myself? I don't have an understanding of it because I'm not seen. I'm not being shown. My culture is not being seen. We're not being represented anywhere. So going into the question that you asked me, I'm quite passionate now about it because around the same time that this was happening, a guy reached out to me when Clubhouse was popping. Yeah, remember that? Clubhouse.
COVID times. Yeah.
This guy reached out to me. I jumped on like a film chat, and I was just talking about the things that I do. And this guy called Victor Rios, he wanted to start this kind of this community of filmmakers called Film Locals, to tell and represent Latin American culture, Latin American stories within media. And so he had this crazy idea, okay, we're going to make 6 short films in 6 days. And I'm like, that is crazy, bro. Like, that is a lot of work. But we did it. And then so through that, I got to have the conversation with so many different people from Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Argentina, other people from Brazil, Peru, Chile, Mexico. Even though Mexico is classed a little bit further, we still class them as your Latin Americans because they're Latinos. Your French Guyanas and all of that kind of like hemisphere. Just kind of feeling the same thing, that we're so underrepresented in all aspects of media. And we realized, well, if no one's going to tell our stories, then we might as well tell it ourselves.
Yeah.
Even as to recently, and this is no dig on Woman King, but one of the things that really annoyed me about it was the lack of representation or the misrepresentation of one of the Brazilian guys. So one of the main guys, the actor, I don't know if have you watched Woman King?
I haven't watched it, no.
So one of the colonizers, I guess he wasn't even a colonizer, he was with the colonizers, but because he was friends with him, he gained some of the benefits of being in that world. So he was well dressed and whatnot, and he was made out to be Brazilian. I need to find out, obviously to me his accent wasn't Brazilian, and then I go to find out that he's Jamaican. And so I'm like, why can't you just get like a Brazilian person to play this? There's so many, especially in London, you know, I mean, I know this film wasn't made in London, but around the world, there's so many. No, because this guy is from London. That was the thing. Sorry, that was my issue. This guy was from London. And so I'm thinking, there's so many Latin American actors in London that are really, really good that you don't see, but they're there. It's just a case of you digging a little bit deeper to find them. Yeah. But they are there. And I just feel like films like this should be doing, or productions like this should be doing a better job of representing the right ethnicities for their films. Even at some points when I'm watching these Woman King, it's an African film that I personally think should have used more African actors. You know, they use John Boyega and what's her name? I forgot what the name of the main woman was. The woman from Black Panther. I can't remember.
I'm not sure.
What's that?
Letitia, right?
Nah. Nah, the other one.
Angela Bassett.
Nah.
Give me more.
But just Google. Fam.
She's one of the warriors.
Yeah, the Danny, the bold one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Danny Guerrero.
Nah, it's not her. Anyway.
Just Google.
Anyway,
bro.
I know.
What's the movie?
Woman King. Anyway, so obviously she was the producer. She was a producer and she was an actress in it. So I knew it was going to be based around her. And obviously they used John Boyega as well and some of these other names just to build up the star power so that people want to come watch it.
And there's also like,
Yeah, her.
She was in Black Fish.
Yeah, she was the main person.
She was in Black Panther.
Yes, she was. She's the main warrior.
The main warrior is Danny Goro.
Oh, bro, I am messing up.
You know what?
Anyway.
Yeah, I was about to say he's a Marvel nerd. Yeah, and by the way, nerd is not an offense because nerd means you're into something. But he's a Marvel nerd, so he'll know the name straight away. That's why I was.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry, my bad. In that case, I got the names wrong.
Yeah, no, he's a Marvel nerd.
But yeah, so like obviously she was always going to be the main person because it's her film. She produced it and whatnot. But I just felt like it could be more representation for accurate depictions of certain races and in certain films. You see it in Hollywood a lot where they're using people to fake accents and do all this stuff, which drops a lot. But specifically for that film is what I remembered is that they used a Jamaican guy to play a Brazilian person. And to your average viewer, doesn't matter because you don't really know.
Yeah.
But as someone who comes from that background, it's like I want to be able to see myself on TV. I want to be able to see myself doing the things that I'm not doing.
I think that makes perfect sense, and I think maybe one of the issues around that, I think just in general, I feel like regardless of what's the industry, I think there's a thing to do with like networking and people that have connections. So like if someone's friends, so goes, hey, we're gonna be working on this movie, and they go, who should we bring on? And instantly they're gonna go, oh, I've got this friend, maybe that person will fit. And I think that's how the conversations usually go.
One of the good things, I just want to highlight this as well. One of the good things about the whole, I guess, approach to being represented in media, Latin Americans being represented in media, especially in London. There's a friend of mine who's also involved in the Film Locals project. His name is Sami Atala, along with Victor Rios and a couple of others. They've created this database called Latinx Actors UK, if I'm not mistaken, where they've made a database of a plethora of Latin American actors and actresses that they are now presenting to your places like your Netflixes and all these things, so that when people come doing their casting calls for, hey, we need a representative from this country to play this role, and then they get in contact and then they use them. So they're using this database now, or they're creating this database, which I just think is exactly what we need.
100%. Aladdin, what did Ashton say? Ashton said good things come from bad places. Why is my like that?
So I wasn't here.
Sorry, my bad.
What was said?
Huh? Nothing.
What was said
Anyway,
Good things come from bad places.
But what came before that?
Oh, bro, that was a lot.
I wasn't paying attention.
there was nothing. It's okay, bro. Don't worry. You keep watching your football game or whatever you're doing.
Watching food on Instagram.
You're watching food on Instagram. That's nice. Can you get me some?
Yeah, bro, same.
All right, listen. I've got one more question for you.
Yeah.
Oh, and I've got a couple more after, but basically I've got one more question before we start checking out. How do you want to be remembered?
Ooh. Okay. So, how do I want to be remembered? In what sense? To the world or to the people who I love?
I guess we can do both, but then you want to be remembered differently.
Yeah.
To the people that you love and to the world. That's interesting. That's an interesting.
I mean, because
why? Well, I guess I'm not gonna ask you why you want to be remembered differently, but
I mean, because when you let people into your life, everyone has a layer of how much you allow yourself to be known to them, right?
But then what happens if everyone remembers you the same? Like whether it's a family or the rest of the world, does that make it less meaningful?
I mean, I don't think it will mean anything because I'll be dead. Once I'm gone, I'm gone. Hey, it is what it is. I did my thing. If this is what you remember me for, then okay. I mean, I would like to be to the world. Say if I get to a point where my career is what I would like it to be and more, is I would like to be remembered as a great director. Who has established a great production company that is lived out through the generations and able to give jobs to to everyone in the industry. So I guess if we're talking business wise, I want to be competing at those top levels as an entrepreneur within the film world, to be able to contribute to society within film, through my films, through the company that I'm running, and just be an overall successful entity in the world. Now, Oscars and all that kind of thing, awards and accolades, that whatever it might come with it. Now, to my family, to the rest of like people who I see close, is I want to be remembered as a kind, giving, thoughtless, selfless individual who loved his family, loved his friends, and wholeheartedly did things for others. I would also like to be remembered as that I am Christian, and so the things that I do is in service to God, for my own sake. I would hate for my image to be tarnished with things that weren't true about me. I guess the last thing that I want is people to tell lies on my name. Things that weren't true in that sense. But yeah, I just want to be remembered as a kind, loving person who wholeheartedly gives to the people who he cares about, to my friends and family, and to the rest of the world. Man, I just want to boss up and just
I love that.
do great things.
I love that. So Aladdin, do you want to drop because Aladdin's got like a new twist on the question, so I'm just gonna I'm learning from Aladdin today.
The last two, yeah?
No, you drop the one before the last, and I'll drop the last one.
All right. It's been a long day. So essentially, the question is, what do you want to promote, right? But I like to split into two questions. So the first one is, what do you like to promote that belongs to you? And the second one is, what do you like to promote that doesn't belong to you?
Okay. So I'll start with what I want to promote that belongs to me is myself as a director and as a cinematographer, as an overall storyteller, that can take concepts and ideas and create them. I feel like as filmmakers, we can literally do anything. Like we're this world's real magicians, to a sense. Like we can take foreign concepts, we can take foreign worlds and foreign ideas and ideologies and put them all together into something that's enjoyable to watch. So to promote myself, I want to be able to offer that services as a director with my own equipment, with my own crew, to be able to tell stories, whatever they might be. As long as I can appreciate them and enjoy the idea behind them, then I can get it done. To promote others, something that isn't mine is, there's two. Can I promote two?
Go nuts.
Yeah, okay. One of them is, obviously, there's Film Locos, which is the Latin American storytelling platform that my friend Victor Rios has developed. We take Latin American stories and we tell them. So we're trying to make more representation for the Latin American community. The other one is Latin X Actors UK, which is the database for Latin American actors and actresses in the UK, which I hope more and more people get to know, so that you see more representation of the Latinos and Latin American people from South America in these big productions like Netflix, your Amazon Primes, your Disneys, and your bigger Hollywood productions. So that's those two. And finally, I'm sorry, because I've actually got this in my pocket here.
If you have more, if you have like 100, we have time for it.
This is
hello.
My friend's book. I know, I've been reading this. My friend's book, Right Place, Right Time, by Raymond Peleka Moyo, which is a story about a third culture kid who travels from place to place, kind of like creating a home for himself. So super interesting. I'm only down to chapter 4, but I feel like it can communicate to a lot of third culture kids who have gone through the same experiences of changing homes and establishing themselves in a completely foreign place. Like myself, I'm a third culture kid, and I'm looking at this book, not because I know him personally, but just because some of the stories that he says, it's just like, yeah, I get this, I understand. Concepts of like bullying and concepts of not feeling welcomed in this new place are all concepts that he writes, which are really hit home in certain aspects whilst I'm reading this.
Yeah, sounds relatable.
Yes, sir. That's it.
Just before you drop that last question, I do want to share something. So for those who don't know, I met you on a project that I produced 2 years ago. And since then, I've been following a lot of what you do, watching a lot of your stories, looking at a lot of your posts. And essentially what I want to do is to let you know and let people know that you are an inspiration for me personally, and I'm assuming for a lot of people. And what inspires me the most about what you do is of course, like, you do a lot of what I want to learn, but I actually know you personally. I have a conversation with you every now and again, and I can invite you on a podcast, and like I can see like Christopher Nolan and the Russo brothers as inspirations, but I can never have a conversation with them. And that's one of the most powerful things about having a role model is people talk about like who's your role model, and people share those who are famous or popular, and they've never had a conversation with these people. And that's like that problem with the whole don't meet your role models because they might break your heart. But if you know your role model personally, that can never happen. Well, it can happen, but like it's very difficult to happen. So I didn't want to share that. I wanted well, I should have done this moment in private, but it doesn't matter. But you are an inspiration for myself, and you're an inspiration for a lot of people. So what you're doing is amazing. Please, if you plan on stopping, let me know. Let me take over,
bro.
Jeez,
Thank you.
that was lit, man.
That was amazing, my brother. Thank you so much.
I should do that more often.
I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me hearing it. I feel like as a self-employed, especially when you're working on your own craft, you don't hear words of appreciation enough. And definitely. To me, that just means a lot, man. Thank you so much.
Like Leo knows this a lot about me. Like my main passion is technology. So your video of you building your camera rig, I watched at least like 3-4 times. Oh, because I like the whole. I like a lot of what I have right now is based on that video. Because you know what I'm saying. So like, yeah, man, this is from 2 years ago to now, man. Big inspiration. So
thank you, brother. I'm very humbled to hear you say that. Thank you so much.
That was a beautiful moment.
Let's get that to the last question, man.
I'm almost speechless. No, I'm never taking a piss. That's how bad it is. Do you know what it is? Yeah, I find it really difficult to say something that's nice to Aladdin where he doesn't think that I'm taking a piss.
No, I know you're not taking a piss, but I can't respond. I don't have to respond, so my go-to response is joking.
Cool. My response is, I'm going to ask you the last question.
Okay.
So in the near future, or maybe a bit more distant future, or the near future, whichever future is going to come, actually, let me say it like this. In the present moment in the future that you're going to reach, when you get a chance to tell something to 8 billion people, what do you want to tell them? What's the message they want to put out there?
To 8 billion people. Oh my goodness, that is crazy. Don't overcomplicate things. You know, take what's given to you every day and just make the most what you can with it. Whether that it's to achieve your own goals or just to survive in the means that you're living at right now. Don't take the things for granted and just do what you can. There are people watching you, even if you don't know it. Carry yourself respectably and do the best. That's all I can offer to people, wherever that might be. Whether you're chasing your dreams or whether you're just working for someone else, is do what you can with what you have. And I'm sure things shouldn't go too wrong. Yeah,
that's a great message, man. And yeah, man, gratitude for coming down from the Harry Potter, Oxford, from the Harry Potter end.
Yeah, I should have come in my broom, man. That would have been here quicker.
Yeah, you should have just flown in your room.
Also, just to know, I want to say I really don't like Harry Potter.
Yeah, but listen, on the Harry Potter note, just the other day on YouTube, I saw the new Harry Potter game they're creating.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Oh my days, you know how sick it is?
Is it good?
Yeah, I'm not a Harry Potter fan anyways, but the game looks sick.
Yeah.
It's like an open world, like kind of sort of thing.
What console is it on? PC or?
I don't know. I didn't go that far.
There's something to make it exclusive to that.
I don't know. I'm not going to play it. I just looked at it.
I was never into Harry Potter. I think that's one of the things. Like, I think Harry Potter is one of those things where, like, that game is designed for those who like it, so they understand the lore. Like the Spider-Man game that came out a couple of years ago. I'm a big Spider-Man fan. So when that game came out, I was like, I was all over it.
See, I'm more of a Lord of the Rings and Star Wars type of guy, right?
Star Wars.
So, yeah. So one of the first films that I watched in the cinema ever was Star Wars: The Phantom Menace.
Serious?
And so like I'm watching it and I'm like, oh snap, these men have laser swords and they're out here going shoo, 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 and then blasting, and I see spaceships, and the next thing you know, the flipping devil comes out with his 2 lightsabers and sing out, and I'm like, I didn't know what his name was. Like, to me, he was the devil. He was like, he's red, black, and he's got 2 lightsabers. And I'm like, this is crazy. And then with Lord of the Rings, it was like, to me, it was just an adventure masterpiece. Like, as a kid, I'm watching it, and then probably one of my biggest things, if I'm ever known to make anything relatively close to what Lord of the Rings is, I'll be very happy with my career. Yeah.
I should probably watch those movies.
Soon come, man. Soon come,
man.
Sweet.
Is that sweet, my bro?